So if you clicked on this video title expecting one bulb, well, there might just be two of my favorite bulbs, but it's based on some various situations and reasons. So one of them comes pre-flashed. You can get it from Cough, you can get it from Cloud-Free, directly off of Amazon or the Cloud-Free websites, pre-flashed with Tasmota and or ESP Home. You can add it into your home automation and rock and roll. But the one issue I have is they are based on the ESP32-C3. And it's that software control basically that does the dimming and everything for the LEDs. Now, we've covered some of the ESP32s in the past, some of the chips and whatnot, and that has hardware pulse width modulation dimming, where just basically it looks better for dimming and doing color changes and stuff on LEDs, because it's all hardware based and not done in software. And I know actually I've asked several times before, it's like, man, if someone would have an ESP32 light bulb, that would just be downright awesome. Well, someone's done it, and let's check it out, because we're going to put Tasmota on it. So one thing I did want to point out, when you're shopping for these, whatnot, of course, we'll leave the links down below, but do make sure you get the Pro model. I think they were at the time of the recording, maybe like $1 more or something for the 2-pack or 4-pack. It wasn't much difference, but what the Pro does, that Pro gives you that 5th color channel, so you get warm white and cool white, and then of course RGB. So definitely make sure you get the Pro. The bulb is claimed to be at 810 lumen, 9 watts. Of course, it's RGB CW, and it does work on 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi since it is an ESP32-C3 chip. Now, it's fairly easy to open these. If you watched one of my little unboxing mailbag style videos, I just popped this open with my hands. Now, if you don't want to do that, you can take a spudger and go around the rim. And it just pops right off like that. You don't have to get really crazy with it, but if you, like I say, if you did want to run something around, you can. Now, there's nothing that holds this board on here. There's no screws, there's no soldering. There's just the tension on these little pins here, and then the silicone around the edge, as well as the little silver goo around the back of it that helps with the heat transfer. Kind of like what you see on some of the CPUs with the heat sinks. Now, one thing that I do like to do is take a spudger, and these are just some little cheap little spudgers. You can use whatever. And of course, these are so I don't end up being an idiot and cut my finger open. But you can use whatever you like and have around. I like to scrape this silicone off the edge, and that's going to free up this board. So once you pull all these off, I won't make you watch me do all of them. Now, once you've got the silicone off of all the edges, I have found if you did let this bulb heat up, it is a little easier to pry this board off of it. But we're going to try this one cool and see what happens. And do be careful of this edge. It is somewhat fragile. It's like a weird plastic metal coating, and it can break somewhat. So what I do is I find my spudger and find the larger gap and then slowly pry it up. Now, if you don't want to pry it up too hard, and pull the whole thing up and the whole power supply together. So what I do is I take my finger and push on the antenna here. That little PCB it sticks up is the actual ESP. I apply some pressure so I'm not pulling the whole thing up. And then I'll pull the board up. And you can see it's starting to come loose. And slowly I'll work around the edges, and just take your time. Don't get in a hurry until you can get the spudger around the board. Keep your finger on the PCB antenna, and then it will free up. And you can see it's out of the case where it's pretty, loose. You don't want to pull the power supply out again, and just slowly pull it up, and you should be able to pull the board right off like so. And that way you can see down the neck, and you can see the ESP32-C3, And then the cool part is you'll be able to see the pads right here on the back. If you slowly pull out this board without yanking the wires off of it, this is where it's actually, be careful of doing things, because trust me, it's hard to solder things you're trying to get back in there. There's a small little glob of silicone that kind of holds this PCB in. So if you do want to give yourself some more slack, you can pull it out a little bit, but just don't yank the wires. And the pads we're looking for are right here. As you can see, 3V3, TX, RX, ground, if I stop shaking the table, IO9, and ground. You may be asking, well, what's IO9? Well, IO9 is GPIO9 is on this particular module. We do need to ground that to actually put it into flashing or bootloader mode. So we'll have to solder to these little pads here, and you can see there's plenty enough room to do so. But it would be pretty cool if we had a little clip that would just go clip on the side. You can see that'd be a little better picture. If you can just go clip, and then it would flash it, and then we could pop this back in. Much like I've seen some of the S31 little clips that we could do on Thingiverse. And hey, I think maybe that one could be adapted to also do this one. It just would have to have something different to, ground out GPIO9 for flashing. So a couple things I do like to have handy for doing this type of thing is, well, the first one is this helping hands. It definitely helps out because, you're probably not going to have a family member help you do this. Trust me, been there. And it just allows you to hold the bulb, and then you can use something like some blue tack. And what I like to do with this particular bulb is take some blue tack and hold that board in there to the side, and that way it doesn't move and it doesn't pull out or whatnot, and that way you're not having to worry about yanking those connectors out. So I'll just stick it along the side like so, and that way it holds it absolutely still at an angle, and then I can go through and solder the various connections. If you've been around some of the Tasmota flashing, you would definitely have one of these. And I'm going to be using, in some cases, you'll see this little volt log one. This one has a little bit more power, and especially when you're doing ESP32s, this one definitely works out, but I've had no issue with using what we call in the Discord the little red guy. And that's this one here. Of course, all the links to this will be down below. And your best friend for soldering is going to be flux. Whether you use it in flux, whether the little tub like this that just has, paste all inside and use something to glob it on, or you can use one of these little flux pins and you can just basically mark it like a marker. And the flux just allows that solder to flow and everything. It allows it to stick to the boards, because otherwise you're going to have a lot of issues. Trust me, flux is your friend in soldering. And then what I like to do is some sort of magnification. Now, I've got a little lamp that I use, or they've got different headsets and whatnot you can do for magnification, because trust me, some of these little things are definitely hard to see, and magnification makes all the difference. Now I'm using a little Hakko or Hakko little soldering iron. I like to set mine at 750, and then I can adjust it to and from. Basically, if I feel there's too much heat, it's taking too long, then I can adjust the heat a little bit. But you don't want to just jack it up, because too much heat is also a bad thing. And also, some fine soldering wire helps out as well, because definitely using some big solder wire is just a pain to use. This is 0.015 in solder wire that I'm using here today. So first thing we need to do on the DuPont wires is we need to pre-tin those. And what that means basically is we're going to cut these little connectors off. And I like to use these because if you use something else like the little DuPont, the male DuPont, is what happens, soldering that to it, and it's kind of like gluing a crowbar to a piece of paper. and you can rip those pads off very easily. So I like to use these wires, and that way it just flexes and you don't rip pads off of things. So one thing I do have to do, except on that Volt log one, but this USB TTL only has one ground. And so what happens is I take a little wire like so and put a little header. You can twist these together or whatever, because you basically need to make an adapter to break out ground to 2 wires. Now this one you really could just solder that ground in IO9 if you want to do that, and then you could just pull that solder off afterwards if you wanted to bridge it. But I'll just go ahead and use a wire to it. I can pull it on and off ground. It makes it simple to do. So I'll cut these off. I need 4 for the top, and then 1 for that IO9. So we need 5 total. And then we'll need to strip these. And then one cheat I like to do, since I have them all here, is twist them. Make sure and do twist them, because I've forgotten that before. And then you end up with frayed solder everywhere, and it's a pain to deal with. And if you do make them too long, you can just cut them off later down the road. No big deal. But once you have them all, as I just take and dip them in the flux, and then we're going to apply solder to them. Basically just need to apply a little bit of solder to the wire. Just heat it up. Sometimes you can use the solder that's on the tip is enough. Next up, we need to actually put a little bit of solder on the pads on the bulb. That way that whenever we just heat things up, it'll just suck the wire right into it. Don't forget to apply a little bit of paste actually to those contacts. And one big helpful hint I find is if you have another one of those arms for the helping hands, you can prop your hand up on it, because it's not always the easiest to stop your hand from shaking. It's a weird angle, but we'll see if we can get it done. You don't need much. You don't want to bridge each pad. And you don't have to use any solder, because you have solder on both parts, and you can just hit and hook them up together if you just apply a little heat. So there's IO9, and then I'll come in from the other side on the 4 others. So it doesn't have to be real pretty, but once you get them all done. So the one thing, remember we do have that ground wire. So we're going to connect our little splitter and then ground together. So that's our purple and orange. We will hook up our USB cable to it and see if we can get signal. So when you're hooking these wires up, I was wrong. You need to have the TX to RX and RX to TX. That way you can do the communication between the two. Now, one thing I do like to do as soon as I go ahead and connect all the wires, just instead of going and trying to flash it right away, I like to just see what is the chip is on there. This will help you identify if you're putting the right flash on it, etc. So I use ESP tool. It's a little Python script. It works on pretty much any particular operating system. If you need the instructions on how to install it, we'll leave that link down below. It's a simple tool to install. And I just do flash ID. And it will connect up, and you can see it will see that this is the ESP32-C3. And it does have the 4 megabyte flash, which is important. We don't want to put that 2 megabyte, or potentially in the future, maybe they may ship with a 2 megabyte. You don't want to put the 4 on the 2 and vice versa. Now do remember, once you did this command, you need to cycle the power on this device because it's now no longer in bootloader mode. Now the easiest method I found to install Tasmota on these is just use the Chrome based one. It's going to put all the files on there for you. If you cannot use the Chrome one for some reason, then you go check out the ESP flasher that Tasmota has. It has all the parts and pieces. It does the partitions right for you and everything. And then there's even the ESP tool Pi. Just copy and paste this little thing here, but you do need to go download your bin files manually. That's why it's a lot easier, just if you can, to use this web-based installer, because you can see you don't have to download anything and it just automatically puts things on. Watch, check this out. You'll notice there's no just regular Tasmota 32. Now there's Tasmota 32 Bluetooth, but we're not going to do Bluetooth on it just yet. You can come down and look at the development or the special builds, etc. But even though we do have the ESP32-C3, just go ahead and pick Tasmota. It automatically will detect the chip for you, and it will put the right bin for you, which is pretty cool. As you can see, if you highlight it over, it says supported families, the 32, 32C3, S2, S3, and the 8266. Pretty cool that they've done that, because you don't have to have any guesswork on which one is the right one. So we'll just pick that one and hit connect. And it's going to ask us, hey, which one we want to use for the USB. That's the one we have. And then we'll hit install release Tasmota English. Yes, we want to erase the device. We'll hit next. And we'll hit install. And at this point, you're getting stuck or you can't move forward and everything, and you just can't figure out which wires are not connected, definitely come hit us up in Discord down below. We can probably help you out and move forward and getting these bulbs done. But once you start with the installation part here, it's all downhill from here. And well, let's just go ahead and jump to when it's done. Once it's finished, you'll get the installation complete message. Now, I have in the past with some dev boards, you could use the logs and console, but remember, we have that IO9 is to ground. So even if we do try to use the log and console, it's just not going to let you pull up that device. You need to pull that off. And I don't think even the reset works because we don't have all the pins. So what I do is just go ahead and power cycle it, and then you can use a serial terminal, or you can use that access point mode and get it up onto your Wi-Fi. So what I like to use is something like Termite. You can use whatever type of serial terminal and just connect to it at 115, 200 baud. And what I do is just hit enter. And you know right here, is the device flash? Is it working? Whatnot. If you really want to, you can do restart _1 and just see if it gets a bunch of errors. If it starts boot looping or whatever, then if it shows, hey, it's starting up as AP mode, you could just connect to it and put it into your device using your phone or whatever. But hey, don't forget, we got serial access. We can just type to it. As I'll type SSID 1. And you could do a backlog, but of course I'm lazy on this aspect. I do password 1, and then I'll paste in my password. And once it restarts, you should see, hey, if it's going to connect, and you'll get the IP address. And here we are, 10.10.1.188. So really at this point, now I like to go ahead and take the wires off of it. It's on my Wi-Fi. I know it's good to go, and I can put this thing on mains power. So once you unsolder the wires, basically what I do is I just make sure this board is pushed down in that little neck. You can see there's little notches. It might be hard to see on camera, but when you do yours, you'll see what I'm talking about. And just push it down in there. It's in the little slots on both sides, making sure mine is. And then you'll take the LED board. This little connector is just gonna go into those little 8 pins. And then you'll just basically push it down and push this LED board back in, and it should pop all the way down in there. And you'll also see the pins on this little connector push through those little holes, and it locks everything down. Everything is good to go. If you really want to, you can go and get some little silicone and put it on the edge and replace that. But once you do pop this diffuser back on, it holds that board back in place. And you can see, if you jiggle it, you won't feel it jiggling back and forth. It holds everything and you're good to go. So we'll get this hooked up on mains power, and we'll put the template on it and get it configured up into Home Assistant. So once you have the bulb on mains power, as you can see, I got a little lamp fixture here, and we got it situated in the camera. And we browsed over to that IP address that we saw during the serial. Now, if you use the access point mode, it would have given you the IP address, or you could just do a scan like with Fing or something on your network to find the IP address. Now, at this point, ESP32-C3 is set up, but there's no light or anything on it. And well, let's go ahead and put the template on. I do have that in the description of the video, or you can head over to my website, and I've found this using that new device procedure. It's pretty simple to do, but we'll just do the copy and paste thing. Now this is the RGB CT, which is the color temperature. So we'll just copy and paste this one in here. We'll go to console. Now this is the C3, so of course you have to hit console again. Paste it in. Now it's going to reboot once you paste it in, so give it a second. See if it comes back. And there she's back. And if you go back to the main menu, you'll notice now you have all the sliders. So you can go ahead and toggle it on, and you can kind of see it there in the camera. We'll probably turn the light out, and we'll see if we can turn this up a little bit. And there you can see it there. Now, one thing I wanted to show you about that PWM frequency, but the PWM frequency is set to default 977. So if you don't want that flicker issue, I find like a good number is like around 10,000 or say 20,000. So just find something and test it out with your cameras or your phones or whatever you're going to be using. And if you don't see that flicker, and try a bunch of different brightnesses and such. So you may not see it at 100% because it's 100%, but if you back it down to say 50% and you still don't see it, you're probably good to go, and that's a good PWM frequency for you. And the way you do that, just type in PWM frequency. I know it's a long word, but just put the number you want out there. You can play around with it. It's pretty simple. You don't have to reboot or do anything like that. Now, from here, it's pretty much the same as like all your other different Tasmota devices. What I like to do first is go back to the main menu. Now, double check to make sure this is correct, because you don't want to find out later. Go to firmware upgrade and make sure the OTA URL is set to the correct variant. We do have that 32C3, and of course it is defaulted correct at this time. Sometimes maybe things could get messed up, or on older versions or whatever. Do make sure that version's correct, because you're going to forget, trust me. So it's set up and ready to go right now. Now, if you did want to upgrade to the Bluetooth one, want to play around with that, you could do and put that URL right there if you'd want to. Now, what I like to do first is go to configuration and go to configure other, and change the device name and the friendly name before you put it onto MQTT. Otherwise, it's going to get pulled in as like Light 1 or Light 2, and yeah, that sucks. And you may put like a friendly name in there, like a lamp for like living room lamp or something like that, because yeah, you can use this with device groups and everything else. It all works the same on the ESP32. So once you save those, then we'll go through, go to configuration, and we'll do the MQTT thing. Now I have mine as a DNS. You put your IP address, if you're not using DNS, of your MQTT broker, which is usually your Home Assistant IP address. And we'll leave all this the same except for the user. So we'll put the user, the password, the topic will just be, I'll use the same as my device name. I like to keep it simple. I'll rename stuff in Home Assistant if I need to. And then the bulb will reboot. Then once it's rebooted, I do like to go verify in the console that it is connected to MQTT. And the way you can do that, you'll see right here, you'll see it says MQT connected, and you know it's ready to go. So we'll switch over to Home Assistant, and we should see it in the Tasmota HA integration. I think it's services, integrations, and then dig around, and there we go. And then we can do a search for Vont. And there it is. And you should be able to toggle it right here. And you can see, yep, working, ready to go. Now we'd probably want to add this to a card or some sort. So we'll just say add the dashboard. Add the dashboard, sure, and there's the bulb right there. And we can change, go to warm if we want to. And if you get this issue, there's one thing we forgot, is that sometimes the command doesn't go in all the time. You'll notice when I brought it to warm, how the color went all the way down. You do need to go do a set option. It's set option 92. You can see it. I had it in here, but it doesn't always come across. Not sure why. Make sure and do set option 92 space 1 on the bulb. And then we should be able to, and you can actually tell it is doing warm now. And then you can also do in the middle, which I really like about color temperature bulbs. I'm not a big fan too much on doing color. We rarely ever use it, but it is cool when you need it. But I really love being able to do like warm white, cool white, etc., because then you can dial in exactly that color temperature. And then when you want to have fun on some of the holidays, you can come in here and kick in some of the different colors. And they got some pretty decent colors on this bulb as well. So whatever bulb you choose, you know, you may not be into that DIY thing of soldering and whatnot. It may have a lot of different trouble, or by that time, someone may have made a jig to do these bulbs and just clip something on and call it a day. But if you want something that is the reliability, what I find of Tasmota, and being they can just self-control and not have to worry about other radios or whatnot like Z-Wave or Zigbee, and you can just hit the web server on them or whatever type of API they have, well, these ESP-based bulbs might be for you. And yeah, the ones that you just take out the box, like from Call for Cloud Free, just quite awesome that they have those available for us. And of course, if you want to find those, you can find the links down below. There are affiliate links, and the way those do work, they don't add any additional cost to you, but they do help out the channel, and we do appreciate it. So that's all for this one. I do appreciate all the Patreon subscribers and YouTube members. It definitely helps bring new products and projects to the channel all the time. And y'all know the drill.
Goodbye. Press all the buttons, and y'all take care.